We are in the Forum in Rome, and behind me you have Titus Arch. You know, many people keep telling you that Israel did not exist, that Israel never was had a presence of the temple in Israel. But behind us we have what is called the evidence in the conquest after the destruction of the temple, how Titus brought through this arch a triumph, a victory, a great victory that he had as a general, and the demise of the temple in Jerusalem. Right behind me you see the evidence of the entry, the triumph and the entry of the victory of Titus in regards to the victory over the Jews, bringing people with them, slaves, and also bringing the menorah and some of the other elements that were in the temple at its destruction. This is what we know, that the evidence establishes the truth, and no one can ever say that the Jews never existed or that the temple was never in place in Jerusalem. In the book of Acts, in the latter chapters, after Paul was arrested in Jerusalem, and he was accused of bringing Gentiles into the temple, he spent a few years in Caesarea as he was a prisoner, and then he was sent to Rome because he appealed to Caesar. As he appealed to Caesar, now he comes over here. He spends 2 years in Rome. Now, you may think, well, what would he be doing in Rome? I went to Philippi and I saw the bema. I went to Corinth and I saw the bema. I am here, and that right behind me, where the column is, was the bema, in which philosophers or anyone can stand and speak to people, even the emperor, if he was able to come over and talk to the mass audiences. Now, you may ask the question, how would the gospel spread so fast in the first century? I've asked the same question throughout the last cities that I visited. It's because him being a Roman citizen, he had the ability to stand in the bema and talk with the philosophers, the Stoics, and some of the other people that were bringing messages to the whole audience that you will see here in the Forum, in the Agora, in the main center of Rome. With 4 million people in the first century, Paul would have been here teaching to the people, trying to expand the gospel and teaching the good news, making the contrast between the imperial cults and Messiah as the master instead of the emperor as his master. This is the context of the first century writings, and the narrative makes more sense if only we come to these places and study the archaeology, the history, its cultural backgrounds, and all the information in the Bible will make more sense. The city of Rome is next to a big river, the Tiber River. We know Romulus dedicated the city, and the Jews came in here sometime during the time of the Hasmonean family or previous to that. You know, we know that there was some kind of agreement between the Romans and the Maccabean family, later on the Hasmonean family, and then many Jews came here, and then there was the destruction of the Hasmonean period, the temple, and they came here as slaves, and then we saw a huge migration after the destruction of the first temple. Now, when I came to the Jewish Museum here in Rome, I asked, where was the ancient Jewish community located at? And they mentioned on this side of the river, they said that during that time, normally all the Jews lived outside on this side of the river, and they pointed out to this particular ancient synagogue. It's not a synagogue anymore, it's actually a restaurant. But it's actually called Vicolo della Gleta. It's building number 14. And they believe that there was a synagogue here in the Travestere area, and you can recognize it by the way it looks. It's very distinct than any other building here. Now, why is this important? I come to these places not because I want to say, hey, Paul was here. No. It's just that I know throughout history, Jewish communities are very tight-knit type of communities. And more than likely, if there was a synagogue, and there was a synagogue here, an ancient one, more than likely, they just kept building and destroying, remodeling and building and rebuilding in the same location until the late 1800s, in which they moved the Great Synagogue on the other side of the river. But it was a really good point of interest when the guide at the museum told us that all the Jews lived on this side of the river and they had their community over here. And that was quite interesting. So more than likely, I can't give you 100%, but more than likely, following the evidence that we have, more than likely when Paul spent 2 years in Rome, he would have lived in the Jewish community where there is a mikveh, where there is a synagogue, where there is the place where the Jews will come. So who knows, maybe this place back or somewhere in this area, there was the original synagogue that Paul came to and spoke to the Jewish community in this location. And this is what we try to find in all our research and our studies to validate the Bible. So yes, there were ancient synagogues on this side of the river in ancient Rome.